which is themed on solar heating and cooling, shall be conducted by the eminent speaker, Dr. Jignesh Mehta sir, Faculty of Mechanical Engineering Department and Faculty of Technology and Engineering at Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. He has obtained his doctoral degree from IIT Bombay in the field of liquid desiccant based solar air conditioning. He is the co-inventor of Indian patent on a novel solar thermal collector developed at IIT Bombay. He is engaged in active research and executed many projects sponsored by UGC, Gujarat, and AICTE. Dr. Mehta sir has written and presented several papers in journals and conferences nationally and internationally. He is a distinguished lecturer in ISHRE, that is Indian Society for Heating, Refrigerating and Air Conditioning Engineers. He is also having his YouTube channel to give easy access to the source of learning. We are very much glad to have such a wonderful veteran as a resource person for this session, and we look forward to learn many things throughout this session. On the behalf of organizers and participants, I extend my hearty welcome to you, sir. Without much delay, I hand over the session over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, madam, for the nice introduction. And thanks to the Maswati Institute of Technology for providing this platform to me for disseminating the knowledge. So without much delay, I'll start my presentation. And I will be playing some videos also, and I hope that you will be able to I'll be able to accommodate the system voice also. That generally happens, so that should not be a worry. Yes, so as of now, I can see around 16-20 participants, and I understand that this is the difficult time of the day when one has just taken the lunch, and difficult to focus, particularly when you are watching the screen. So even in physical presentations, people start dozing off when the presenter is presenting, and here even there is nobody to supervise. So it's even more difficult to keep focus of the people. But I'll try to make it or I'll try to engage people as good as possible from my side. So I will not just be delivering, and it will not be a one-way delivery, but I have put two quizzes in between. Yeah, I can see 29 participants. So there'll be quizzes in between. Of course, it's difficult to have a team kind of thing in this, but then I think up to, yeah, so up to probably K, Kinjal Patel, that can be the team 1, everybody above, that is A, B, C, D up to K, and then M onwards, it can be the second team, team B, when there is a quiz, right? And accordingly, you means both teams can will have two quizzes. Okay, I am cancelling the idea of having teams because it's difficult to decide. Because I'm not taking the quiz will not involve the names of the people. So, but at least what percentage of people are giving the right answers, that can be known, and it will be anonymous. So you should attempt it. Okay, so let me start the presentation now. As you know, the topic is solar heating and cooling. So the objective of this talk or the discussion is to have sustainable development in the field of HVAC and R, that is heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and refrigeration. So when you say, when we use the word heating, it will also involve not just the heating of air, but heating in general. So it can be a heating application, not just space heating application, but any other heating application like water heating or even industrial process heating. So this gives you the outline of the presentation, introduction. So the need and relevance of the topic or the sensitization to the issue will be there in the beginning. Then the applications of the solar thermal collector. I understand that the previous lecture covered or explanation of various types of solar thermal collectors, and probably like many of you are also in this field or familiar with this field of solar thermal collectors or solar energy in general. So there will be some discussion on that, and then solar heat utilization, and then later on I'll be also taking certain case studies so that one actually knows the case or numbers and how the things are implemented rather than just discussing the theory and equations, etc. Okay, and then various cooling options will be discussed. So we are a developing country and we are interested in growth, but then there is another aspect of growth. There is enough, as for, like the famous quote, there is enough for on the earth for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. So greed should not become need, and because there are many other not so privileged people whose needs are to be satisfied, and then many times what happens is for advanced needs we are compromising our basic needs like pure water and pure air because of the pollution created, and even you can say organic or naturally grown food is now available at a premium. And again, you have to think about the future generations. When you are utilizing the things, are you compromising their needs? That is a thing, a question which needs to be pondered upon. So that's why we should think about the advantages and limitations of the conventional cooling and heating technologies. So what are the conventional cooling technologies? The vapor compression refrigeration system is the most common or dominant type of cooling system that is used. Of course, it has become dominant because of certain advantages like high COP. It's a compact per ton of refrigeration, and per ton of refrigeration, at least the initial cost is low. But the limitations are that you can only use electrical energy, which is a high grade energy. And the central power plants that are producing this electrical energy create different kinds of pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Refrigerants may be responsible for ozone depletion or global warming, the refrigerants that are used in these systems. Of course, to a large extent, we have addressed the issue of ozone depletion, but global warming is still an issue, and the pollution, different kind of pollution are still very relevant. Then the heating methods, normally electrical or fossil fuel based heating is used, and there are concerns related to pollution in such cases, greenhouse gas emission, global warming, and the depletion of fossil fuels. These are the concerns related to this. So one should do the techno-commercial evaluation, techno-economical evaluation, but also the socio-environmental considerations should be there, and people should behave responsibly as a citizen of the world. So this kind of pictures and figures are familiar to you. We are still largely dependent upon fossil fuels for our energy requirements, and because of that, the pollutants and the CO2 emission is increasing by leaps and bounds, and this needs to be limited. So there is a dilemma whether to progress or to preserve, right? Not preserve the fossil fuels, but even preserve the ecology and preserve the environment. Probably one can never think of even keeping the oil below the ground. If you find some oil field, then the obvious thing that one would think of is to tap that source of oil or crude oil, right? So here there is one case that I am putting in front of you, and that talks about the side effects or the ill effects of the growth. Of course, I am not opposed to any kind of growth, but one should always be aware of the other aspect of growth also. So I'm running a very short video, just 2 minutes video, just to sensitize people or bring the things in front of your mind. So let me play this video. So it talks about a certain area in Amazon forest where there is probably the highest amount of diversity of ecology, and whether to go for oil exploration or oil drilling in such area or not, that's a question. But finally, generally one has to give up, and you do drill and take out oil, but then there are many side effects of that or ill effects of that on environment, so one should be concerned about that. So I hope it will play. Just let me know when it runs, you can hear the voice or not.
Juan and Alberto carved straps of palm into hunting tools. Once these Waorani tribesmen lived off the surrounding forest alone. Now they also sell blowguns and spears to passing tourists as souvenirs.
The voice is also reaching to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'll play.
In the 2 decades since oil companies first arrived here, they've seen their way of life transformed.
The oil companies talk about helping us, but it's a lie. Here, there's more sickness. They damage and pollute the land. Every day, vehicles drive down the roads, and there are fewer animals.
Now the Waorani are afraid things will get worse. Ecuador remains divided by President Correa's decision to extract more oil in Yasuni National Park, one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. A few hours upriver from the Waorani lies the poor town of Coca, the hub of Ecuador's oil industry. Here, people have lived side by side with oil for more than 4 decades and know the benefits and the costs. This is the Coca River. Last year, a broken pipeline spilled nearly 12,000 barrels of oil, that's 1.5 million liters, into these waters. That left the entire population of Coca, a town of 65,000 people, without drinking water. Jose Mateus tells me that all these rocks were black. The journalist says it was a reminder that the government must boost farming and other local industries as a long-term alternative.
Without doubt, oil is our only source of wealth. That's why President depends on it. But how do we get ahead? What happens when we run out of oil?
Ecuador's state oil company refused to speak to Al Jazeera, but politicians from the ruling party insist this time locals will see the greatest benefits from the new drilling.
It's a great challenge for our government to show the world that a small oil-producing country can extract oil despite big environmental risks. Exploiting oil will allow future generations to leave poverty behind.
Looking out over what was jungle just a few decades ago, Juan and Humberto worry that more oil will mean more roads and that one day there will be no animals left in the forest. They want the government to legally recognize their territory now before their way of life disappears forever. David Mercer, Al Jazeera.
So most of our, or a large part, significant part of our oxygen comes from Amazon rainfall. We are destroying even that. So this is making or telling us that we should move towards or try to reduce our dependence on the fossil fuels and move towards the renewable energy sources. Yeah. So there is a hope on the other side. This is the solar map of India. So you can see that over a large part of India, the solar radiation intensity is quite good, in the range of 5 to 7 kilowatt hour per meter square per day. And if one uses distributed energy generation, that is putting up the solar collectors locally for the local needs, then there will not be even transmission and distribution losses. So here I am pitching for solar thermal collectors because they have high conversion efficiency and they are better for better choice for heating or cooling applications. Right? I am not advocating solar thermal collectors for power generation, electrical power generation, but they are very much suitable for local heating and cooling applications because of their high conversion efficiency. There are different types of solar collectors. You are probably already familiar with this. You can categorize them in non-concentrating collectors and concentrating collectors. Among non-concentrating are flat plate collectors, evacuated tube collectors. Concentrating collectors, CPC, that is compound parabolic collector, parabolic dish, parabolic trough, and solar tower, that is the central receiver type of power plant. And again in ETC, you can have direct flow type and heat pipe type. Some of them will be illustrated with figures in the coming slides. So solar heat applications. First, we'll talk about the heating applications. Domestic or industrial water heating. Domestic water heating is probably the very common and the first application of solar energy or solar thermal collectors. We do see these collectors around us, but the penetration is not as much as it should be, as you can see the data here. So it is shown that what was the capacity of solar thermal systems in India in 2010 and in 2017, right? So there is a growth. It has more than doubled, but according to absolute numbers, it still it has hardly reached of any of its potential. And then you see China on this axis, but you can see that you had to create a different axis for China, right? Here it is in 5, 10, 15, 20. Here it is 100, 200, 300, 400, right? So the capacity expanded or created by China is altogether at different order of magnitude. Okay, and that's why you can see that it is challenging the superpowers of the world. One of the reasons of this is that it has explored or used as much as possible not just the fossil fuels or the conventional fuels, but also the renewable sources of energy. So other applications, of course, solar cooking. So even at domestic level, many of these things can be implemented by us, right? We generally, for any solution, we point finger towards government, but then at our own, like as it is told, charity begins at home. At our home, we can start implementing the solutions, and slowly it will spread awareness among the people. Like if we educated people or privileged people start implementing the things, it will spread fast into the society, and it will create positive impact. So solar cooking at domestic level and community level, right? It does save fossil fuel and help reducing the CO2 emission and create a clean cooking environment. Then industrial process heating. There are many potential applications. Food processing, so different applications like pasteurization, cooking, meat processing, blanching of vegetables, solar drying, etc. Textile sector also, there are applications: washing, drying, bleaching, desizing, paper and pulp industry, and chemical industry. And then refrigeration and air conditioning, which will also be discussed. District heating and cooling, water desalination, I think it has been covered very widely during the lectures, and solar space heating. So domestic solar water heating systems. Again, here you can see that China is at #1, right? And this scale has to be, a log scale has to be created here because of the very high number from China, as you can see, right? Otherwise, there was no need of creating the log scale on the vertical axis. But then, because the megawatt hour, it is 324,506 for China. That's the capacity of the domestic solar water heating systems in China. And then the next number is directly coming at around 15,000, then 13,000 for Germany, and India is at the 4th place with 6,673. So there is a large potential even for the domestic water heating in India and many other countries. Solar water heating systems, you could see that India is at a 4th place, and that's why there is some reason like we may feel that yes, we are not very far behind. But this is like a scenario of vaccination, right? Though per day we are providing highest number of vaccines per day, but then the population is so large that percentage wise or per 1,000 people, we are much behind. So here also India, per 1,000 people, if the numbers are shown, then the water collectors, number of water, or rather the capacity in kilowatt or thermal. So many other countries, very small countries, are much ahead of India. India is not even seen in this graph, but yes, China is seen. So you can see that China has more of evacuated tube collector and less of flat plate collectors. And many other countries have mainly the flat plate, utilizing the flat plate collector, and unglazed collectors are mainly for swimming pool heating. So you will generally see that very prosperous or developed countries are using them. As you will see later on for USA also, that number is quite high. And here you can see for Australia that number is high. So what I'm trying to show is there is a very large potential for solar water heating systems also. And many times one has to give example of advanced countries to prove your point. So this does show that there is a large potential for solar water heating in India. And here you can see different types of water heating systems, and what are the applications of that, right? Let me remind you that at some point of time there is going to be quiz, so do understand and digest the numbers. Okay, so here what this graph shows is, let me hide this panel. So what this column chart here shows is what are the different applications of solar water heating systems. Okay, different types of solar water heating systems. So one of them is swimming pool heating, the other one is district heating and solar cooling, that is other. Then solar combi systems, that is domestic hot water and space heating combined for single or multi-family houses. Then large domestic hot water systems. Okay, so this one is large, and this is combi systems that is used along with air heating, and then domestic system for single family houses. Right? So what you find is that if you look at the picture in the world, this domestic hot water system contribute 42%, while large domestic hot water systems for multi-family houses and tourism public sector, so that is also even higher than that at 50%. This shows you the what are the main applications of the water heating systems. If you look at the picture in USA, it is a bit different. Here the most application is for swimming pool heating, right? So that tells something about the lifestyle of the people. Even in Australia also it is quite high. So this is known to you. It's a solar flat plate collector, and you know the standard components of a flat plate collector. So these are the riser tubes through which the water flows, and many times it's by natural convection, and you need to provide the insulation below that. At the top you will have the glazing, and you have the two headers on two sides. Okay. In domestic water heater you connect it with a tank, but if it is industrial applications, then you will be pumping the water through this, and there'll be cold water tank and there'll be hot water tank where you'll be storing the hot water. Now what this graph is telling you is that probably you are familiar, or I'll explain it in brief, about the nature of efficiency of a solar collector, the graph of efficiency of a solar collector. So you may be knowing that the efficiency of a solar collector, right, you cannot give a single number like the average or mileage of your vehicle, right? It depends upon the condition at which you are driving it, right? At what speed range you are driving it, and whether you are driving it in urban conditions where there is a traffic and a lot of use of clutch and brake, or whether you are driving it on a highway. So it depends upon that. So similarly, the efficiency of a solar collector depends upon what the temperature of the fluid, okay, the temperature up to which you are heating the fluid. That this can be the mean temperature, or it can be the outlet temperature, or rather inlet temperature of the fluid when there is a closed circuit, and the ambient temperature. So the temperature difference, higher the temperature difference, less the efficiency of a solar collector. As you can see that the slope is negative, and this G is the insolation level, right? So higher the solar insolation, higher the efficiency of a solar collector. So it's not that you cannot achieve high temperatures with a flat plate collector. You can achieve high temperatures. You can even boil water in a flat plate collector, but then the efficiency of the collector would become miserably low, as you can see, right? Let's say this red line is the simplest type of flat plate collector, and normally it will be most economical, right? When you try to improve the efficiency, normally the collector also becomes costlier. So the simplest type of solar collector, if you want to use it at a higher temperature, what happens is that the efficiency becomes too low. So you have to improve the quality of the collector, and mainly it is highlighted, or one is talking about the glazing or the glass cover. So this glazing, if it has anti-reflective coating, then it will improve the efficiency or optical efficiency of a solar collector. So you can go on improving this, and it will give you somewhat higher efficiency when you want to use it at a higher temperature. Right? So for, let's say, this 80 to 120, you can see that this collector, green line collector with 3 anti-reflective layer of glazing may provide you the highest efficiency. So for when you want to use it for process heating applications, right, it's the temperatures are not as low as domestic water heating. So you have to use a better quality flat plate collectors. In India, what I can see is in industries, the way the things are marketed, people start talking about the concentrating collectors like CPC collector or the parabolic trough type of collector, etc. But the flat plate collectors with required improvement also can provide you somewhat better temperature ranges, and even you can use pressurized water if you want to go above 100 degrees Celsius. Because the tracking is a big headache. Okay, by the time you might have understood this, so the maintenance related issues and like many times there is a loss of efficiency also because of imperfect tracking. So if possible, the first option, if your temperature range required is not very high, then the first option that should be tried or evaluated should be a flat plate collector, right? So with required quality improvements, one can certainly use flat plate collectors for process heating applications in industry also. Let's go to another slide. So this explains the things about CPC, the compound parabolic trough type of collector, and it has been being marketed as a product which can provide you higher temperatures required for process heating applications in industry, and there are certain advantages of this, and they call it non-imaging type of collector, and that means that even the diffuse radiation that is falling on these reflectors, they are focused on this, they are focused on the focal point or focal line, and because of that you achieve higher efficiency. And there is no like you have the reflector even between these receivers, right? So the loss which would otherwise happen, let's say in case of the evacuated tube collectors, there is a gap between the two tubes, but here even in that gap this reflector is present which will reflect it on the collector, and that way that loss will be reduced. So that is what has been shown, that for the you can use less number of tubes, you can use less number of tubes for the same heating rate that you want to achieve when you put these reflectors below this evacuated tube type of collector. And the inner construction of the evacuated tube collector, the heat pipe based collector, is shown in this figure. And here there is like it's not like a domestic water heater where you have a tank and the water rises into that tank by gravity. Here there is a manifold through which you will be pumping the water, right? Through this header it will be pumping the water, and this is a heat pipe. Okay, you can see this is the heat pipe, and this heat pipe has two parts. This part is the condenser part which provides heat to the water which is flowing in this manifold. So water is not going into these tubes. The water is flowing through the manifold only, the straight path. This is the heat pipe, and this heat pipe is evacuated and little amount of working fluid. Many times the water, demineralized water, is used as the working fluid, and it is charged into this. This is the evaporator portion of the heat pipe. And how does the heat reach this evaporator? So it is with the help of these fins. As you can see, this is probably you know about the evacuated tube, the double glass tube, the inner outer surface of the inner tube. There are two concentric tubes in this, and the inner surface of the outer surface of the inner tube is acting as an absorber, and that heats or the heat is conducted through the inner tube to this fin, and this fin provides it to the evaporator section of the heat pipe, and then it finally goes into this condenser portion, and it indirectly transfers the heat to the water flowing in the manifold. So this is the one scheme that may be used for industrial process heating, the evacuated tube collector with heat pipe, and in this case even the CPC reflectors have been put. So this explained you the details about CPC evacuated tube type of collector with heat pipes. And there is another arrangement also possible as shown in this, where you can have a U tube. So water, now in this case the water is going to enter into this tube. It will enter through one of the tubes, it will go to the opposite end and come back. But then again, you cannot just put the tube, you cannot put tube just like that inside this evacuated tube, right? You have to provide fins. I think the fins are also seen in this, which conducts the heat from the inner surface of the inner tube to these tubes, and as the water passes through these tubes, it gets heated. So this is another arrangement, U-tube arrangement, in case of the evacuated tube collectors. So there is one collector, the application illustrated here, the case study, and it's for installed by an automotive company at Nagpur for engine component cleaning, and the CPC type of collectors have been used here, and the temperature is increased up to 85 degrees Celsius, and the collector size is 442 meters square, and there are 130 non-imaging concentrators. This is nothing but CPC type of collector, and the heat delivery on a clear day, of course it has to be a clear day, 650 to 950 kilowatt hour per day, depending upon the average monthly radiation. So that per day it collects this much heat, and the energy savings has been shown to be around 2.9 lakh electrical units per year. Okay, so that's around 25 lakh rupees per year. The saving per year has been shown, right? So that's the saving in terms of money, and the other aspect of this is saving in terms of CO2 emissions if you use electrical power. Yeah. So now I'm going to play a video, and then after that there'll be a quiz, and this quiz is based on the video that will be played. Okay. So I will play the video first, and then I would request you to attempt the quiz. Right, there is no collection of the names. Names are not collected in this. So I'll just have the look at the statistics, and and this is also to keep you alert during the presentation as well as during the video. So this is basically showing you how CPC collector has been used in a plant, instant tea plant. So let me play this video.
Sandesh, powering the future. This project is located in the Jalpaiguri district of West Bengal, where Goodwin Group has their instant tea plant inside one of their flagship gardens, Ivy Tea Garden. This is the view of Ivy Tea Garden. Instant tea plant is a 100% export-oriented unit, produced instantly, which requires on an average 5,000 liters of water per hour
and this water need to be heated up to 80 degrees centigrade. Heating portion is taken care of by steam, which is generated by burning coal. This is the view of the second plant from the front. To reduce the use of fossil fuel and carbon emission, Goodby Group installed CPC collectors on its rooftop to harness solar energy to heat up the water. This is the view of the solar collectors on top of the roof. There are total 212 CPC collectors distributed in two adjoining roofs. One roof is carrying 107 collectors and the other roof is carrying 105 collectors, thus forming two different loops, which is passing through two different pHs. During sunny period, water inside the CPC collectors get heated up by absorbing solar energy, and this hot water starts circulating inside the closed loop with the help of the pump. While circulating in a closed loop, this hot water passes through the PEG or plate exchanger, while it transfers the heat to the cold water and once again goes back to the CPC collectors, where it gets heated up once again and gives up its heat energy while passing through the PEG. This cycle carries on till such time the sunlight remains. To extract maximum benefit out of the solar collectors, two actuator valves were installed, which is basically a PID controller, sends the input water temperature and releases only that much amount of steam which is required to increase the temperature to 80 degrees centigrade, especially during not so sunny days or cloudy days. This is the inside view where heat exchange is taking place through the solar PHs. These are the pumps which circulates hot water through the PHE. This is number 1 solar PHE or plate heat exchanger. And this is number 2 plate heat exchanger. This is the view of actuator valve. With the installation of CPC collectors, on an average per day, around 600 kg of coal savings was recorded. This is the solar panel, which shows the solar inlet temperature is 91 degrees centigrade, and the processed water which is going inside the plant is 86 degrees centigrade.
Yes, so I hope you are ready for the quiz. Are you ready for the quiz?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'll post the link on this message box, and you can try that. Okay, it was there in the presentation also, or I can. Let me open it for the responses. It's accepting responses. Okay, so it's there in the message box. Please attempt it. So there are only, I believe, 5 questions. So should not take more than 3-4 minutes. Somebody is too fast. Already one response has come. Yeah, so I believe everybody is awake and attempting the quiz. Do not replay the video and then submit. So you should be fast enough. So some are easy questions, some are not so easy, a bit twisted or indirect. So I'll wait for a minute or two. After that, we'll discuss the answers. So we teachers, faculties do take such quizzes. So it's our turn now, and understand the experience by our students. Very less number of responses yet. Is it that only 8 people are actively sitting and others are passive? Okay, so I hope next quiz will be taken up by many more participants. So let's talk about the answers and responses. 0.88 per 5 points. I don't know, my questions are too difficult or most people are not attentive. which fuel will be replaced by solar thermal collectors, right? So at the beginning of the video, of course, it might not be as easy for you because you have to catch a particular word. So it was described that it will be saving coal, which was otherwise used for heating. Then which of the following is an incorrect statement? So plate heat exchangers are used. Here it seems that my answer itself, no. 4 of the 9. It was plate heat exchanger. That is correct, right? Okay, correct. Shell and tube heat exchanger is used, so that is incorrect. Glycol water heat exchanger used. It is water to water heat exchanger. Probably the question itself has some problem. Incorrect statement. So plate heat exchanger is used, that is correct statement. Shell and tube is used, it is actually incorrect. Glycol water is used is also incorrect. And water to water heat exchanger is correct. So actually there are 2 correct and 2 incorrect statements. So the question itself was probably faulty. Yeah, which instrument is installed on the roof again may not be as easy, but those who are familiar or teaching the subject of solar energy would be able to give the answer. And on the roof, right? Other things were in the on the ground floor or inside the shed, but the one thing on the roof was the pyranometer. So probably I can show you that. Yeah. So this is the pyranometer, right? Many of you might be familiar with this. It is used for measuring the what? Can somebody reply in the message box?
Global radiation.
Global radiation, correct. Okay. So it is used for measuring the global radiation or total radiation, right? Diffuse plus beam. So this is there on the roof. Other things were there on the ground floor, right, in the shed. So, and then what are the process parameters? What are the process parameters? Process water 80 and 1000 liters per hour. So that was the right answer. Okay, process water, the specification wise, it was 80 degrees Celsius, but it was shown that it goes up to around 86 degrees Celsius, while solar input was more than 90, right? And it was 1000 liters per hour. Other things are not correct. Now, what is the location of the plant? This should have been the most easy question, but still not many correct answers, right? It is in West Bengal, Jalpaiguri. Okay, so this was to engage you in a bit different way rather than just one-way delivery, and to make you more alert. Right? So let me start the presentation again. Yeah. So now I'm talking about the other type of collectors which may be used for again heating. And when you talk about cooling, actually the same collector which is used for heating may be used, right? Because finally you are converting heat into cooling with the help of a refrigeration system, right? So then for the another one is parabolic trough type of collector, and so this should be used when you need higher temperatures, right? You should not use the concentrating type of collectors for low temperature applications, because at low temperatures they will give you lower efficiencies and the investment cost also would be higher. So as you can see here, it is used for the application at 210 degree Celsius, and the pressure, the steam pressure is 18 kg per centimeter square, right? And one such plant installation details: fluid heating system for steam generation integrated with existing high pressure natural gas fired boiler, So it is to some extent replacing the natural gas. Of course, you cannot depend 100% on the solar, because there could be many cloudy days, as well as at night you don't get insolation, solar radiation at all. Again, early morning and late afternoon or evening hours, you don't get the solar energy. Then the size and number of concentrators, the 96 parabolic trough, 615. This is again one place in India only. And steam generation, 280 to 325 kilogram per hour. So I'm putting these things just to show you that there are such existing systems. Yes, numbers are very less and there is a great potential, but of course there are many challenges also related to the performance and the maintenance, and that's why it is probably not picking up. And so this needs to be addressed from the side of the researchers and the companies, as well as the consumers also should change their attitude. So one word came to my mind, that one should become a contributor rather than a consumer. So if that attitude changes, then the acceptance could increase. And it is projected that this will save 32,800 standard cubic meter of natural gas per year, or 16 lakh rupees per year. And I think people are familiar with such systems. Schaeffler dish system used for steam generation, and it is used at many different religious places for preparing food, so community cooking purpose, and that saves a lot of fossil fuel. Right? So these are some examples or demonstrations available, and it is expected that these type of systems are accepted as commercial systems by industries also. Solar thermal heating systems, the growth is shown here. So growth is not bad, but absolute number wise, it's not a very big number if you compare it with the fossil fuel consumption. So between 2010 and 17, there has been growth at 46% in collector area per year, and 25% in number of systems. And some of the systems have been illustrated in this table. And you can see that India also has contributed in 2017 36 systems, and then a collector area of 15,000, third row, 15,313 meter square area, and average collector size is 425 meter square. These are all process for the solar thermal collectors for solar process heating applications. And what are the fields where these systems are used? As you can see, for mining, it is being used to the maximum amount. And on the left-hand side axis show you the collector area. So this column height shows you the collector area, right? So for mining, it is it has crossed 250,000 meter square area. And for other applications are food, and then textile, and then chemical. Okay, so food is around 50,000 meters. So this is world over, and the number of systems are shown with the help of these dots, okay, or legends. So this is number of systems and installed capacity in megawatt of thermal. So we are now starting our talk about the cooling application using the solar thermal collectors. This is the vapor compression refrigeration system. The components and cycles and hardware is known to us. And if you want to use solar heat or waste heat for cooling, the type of systems are different. So those type of systems have been illustrated here. Solar driven, solar thermal, it can be open cycle, closed cycle, or thermomechanical. Liquid desiccant based system, solid desiccant based system, adsorption, radiation cooling system. In thermochemical, it's steam ejector. Of course, the other way is to produce electrical power and run the system with the help of the electrical power also. It can be photovoltaic or it can be Peltier systems. So one can use CPC. Of course, flat plate collector has not been shown here, but that is also one of the candidates type of solar thermal collectors which may be used for cooling applications. And compound parabolic concentrator CPC, the range of temperatures normally available with these collectors have been shown. Normally, as you try to get higher and higher temperature, initial cost of the system increases, and many times the tracking related issues and maintenance cost also increases. So just out of fancy, one should not use the concentrating collectors. Dish collectors, hot water, 110 to 150, and even for even higher temperatures, 180 to 210. Okay. Now, can somebody tell me if I can run my this water chilling system? This is normally talking about absorption cooling. If it can run with 90 to 110, why should I go for 180 to 210 in some cases? Can somebody tell me why should I use collectors with higher temperatures if it can run at a lower temperature? Obviously, producing the heat at a lower temperature would be easier, right? The collectors will be simpler, the cost of installation will be lower, and generally it will also give you higher efficiency. And why to go for higher temperatures? You can put answer it in the chat box, or you can orally tell that. Yes, Pradeep Patel wanted to tell something.
No, sir.
So 7 lectures have already been delivered. Probably you could find your answer somewhere in one of the lectures. Probably the lecture by N.M. Bhatt sir. I think it covered the whole breadth of refrigeration and air conditioning. Okay, so I'll answer. So that's probably the usefulness of my lecture. Yeah. So this chilled water system, it can be absorption cooling system, but again in absorption cooling you have single stage, 2 stage, and now even 3rd stage. 3 stage systems are there. So when you want to increase the effect, single effect, double effect, triple effect. So for double effect you need higher temperatures, for triple effect you need even higher temperatures. And as it will be shown, higher the number of effect that you have in your water chilling plant, more the COP that you can expect. So here there is a table given where different technologies for producing chilled water, or you can say water chilling plants, or basically producing cold, different technologies or equipment have been shown. So one is working on closed cycle, another on the open cycle. Open cycle is nothing but desiccant based systems, and closed cycle you can have absorption or adsorption. So the first column is for adsorption, and for what the size of systems it is normally used, that has been mentioned here. So adsorption used for 50 to 430 kilowatt, you can divide it by 3.52 roughly for getting tons of refrigeration. And again, this is the absorption system. So most common one is water lithium bromide, another one is ammonia water absorption systems. And typical cooling range is 15 kilowatt to 5 megawatt. Actually 15 kilowatt is mentioned, but normally such low systems are hardly seen. And typical COP, and this is for single effect. You can see 0.6 to 0.75 for this. For adsorption has even lower COP, and this is the COP based on the heat that you supply, right? So you can never expect COPs as high as that you get in vapor compression refrigeration systems. And the desiccant cycles, this is solid desiccant system, this is liquid desiccant system, and it has been shown that liquid desiccants have potential to give you COP even with temperature even higher than 1. And this would be possible again, something like double effect, right? Two-stage regeneration, if that is implemented, then it can give you COPs higher than 1. And that's the area where I did my PhD, that is two-stage liquid desiccant based solar air conditioning system. And here the driving temperatures are also shown, that are also important, right? Lower the driving temperatures, you can use simpler and more economical collectors. So lower driving temperature is an advantage, right? A higher driving temperature may be required for double effect and triple effect, right? So your collector would become costlier and more complicated in such systems. Yeah. So this is about different types of thermally driven refrigeration or systems or chillers. And this what I have been telling, that is shown in this figure, the combination of or how you can select the type of collector that you want to use for a particular system. I'll not go into what exactly is this collector, but basically what it shows is something which is suitable at low temperature behaves very badly, or poor performance is given at higher temperatures. As you can see, this it's shown for this CPC. And then there are certain collectors that are shown to have somewhat not so good performance at lower temperatures, but at higher temperatures their performance is of course comparative performance. So when you want to use double effect absorption system, you choose your collector from here, right? Though they may be costlier, but efficiency wise they will be better. Then if you want to use single effect, you can go for somewhat cheaper or more economical collector. Adsorption also requires simpler collector or comparatively low temperature collector, and desiccants also generally needs comparatively low temperature collectors. So the collectors could be simpler in these systems, desiccant system and adsorption system and double single effect absorption. So as it will be shown that some of the systems installed, the actual installed systems, they still use single effect vapor absorption refrigeration system, giving you COP less than 1. So solar cooling, this is the cycle or the scheme. I think this can be easily understood by you. The solar collector, then the storage would be there many times, or most of the times. Then you run your absorption chiller, so the generator, absorber, condenser and evaporator, and normally cooling tower used for such absorption chillers. And again, chilled water storage can be there. Many times, most of the times, you have to support it with the vapor compression system because of uncertainties related with the solar collectors. And then this is the cooling loop. Okay. Now, what this graph is showing is higher the driving temperature, you can get more COP by switching from single effect to double effect and triple effect. But of course, this will increase the cost of the chiller. It will also increase the required temperature from the solar collectors. So the solar collectors will also, the investment cost also will rise. And there have been efforts. So this is for this giving you the range of COPs. Let's say this is the single effect one, and this is the double effect. You can see for single effect you need lower driving temperature, 80 to 100 degree, 110 degree, and for double effect you can see number of cycles. So that is effect or the stages. So here you need higher temperature water or steam, and you get COP in the range of 0.6 to 0.8 for single effect. For double effect it can increase from 0.9 to 1.2. And here there's some list of various producers of such chillers are shown, and some information on a water chiller manufacturer has been provided here. This is for large size water chillers, and normally that is more common. The efforts to make small size absorption or adsorption system have not been very successful because of different reasons. One of the very important reasons is economic also. So this gives you some of the large vapor absorption refrigeration systems installed worldwide from year 2017 to 17, and in India also there is one system, and that's in Gujarat only, Office Gujarat State Electricity Corporation. And there is one shown for which I have put the picture also, and that is at Singapore, and this one, Singapore United World College. Okay. No, it's this. Yeah, there is one video on this. I don't know whether I'll be able to show it or not. MTN headquarter, right? So that uses the linear Fresnel lens type of collector. And one which is mentioned here is probably not the one for which I put the photograph. It is at Singapore, but it's IKEA outlet or superstore. Right? So that photograph follows. Okay, so that is shown here. Solar cooling system at IKEA Singapore using vapor absorption refrigeration system, and the collector area is 2.4. You can see even in such densely populated city nation, they have been able to put up solar collectors. So this is, you can see, flat plate collector, and it's using single effect absorption chiller. Right? So 2472 meter square collector area and 250 tons of refrigeration of capacity is put up there. And then there has been efforts to make small size absorption and adsorption systems, but particularly economic wise, seems that they have not been able to, they have not been very successful. Yeah. Then coming to air conditioning, mainly the latent load removal in case of air conditioning. So you might be knowing that nowadays there is more and more discussion about indoor air quality, right? In this scenario of pandemic also, you're talking about better ventilation, that is providing more and more outside air or fresh air, so that the pollutants generated indoors are, the concentration level does not go high. So when you have more of outside air put in an air conditioned area, what happens is that it carries higher, not just sensible load, but also the latent load. So a dedicated outdoor air system may become relevant in this case. Here it shows a centralized air conditioning system, the conventional one, where you recirculate the return air and mix the outdoor air, and then with the help of electric compressor based refrigeration air conditioning system, you remove latent and sensible load. And sometimes it's possible that if your latent load is high or sensible heat factor is low, you may have to reheat to increase its temperature, and then you put it in the conditioned space. But it is proposed and many times beneficial to have a dedicated outdoor air systems. So as you can see, the return air is treated separately, mainly for sensible cooling, while the outdoor air, the cooling provided is mainly latent cooling when your outside temperature is not very high, but the humidity is high. So latent load is removed here, and then it is supplied in the conditioned space. So in such systems, solar and use of solar energy can become relevant with the use of desiccant based air conditioning systems. So this graph on the psychrometric chart shows you the process possible in desiccant based air conditioning systems, or mainly its dehumidification, removal of moisture. In conventional systems, you will cool it and you will bring it below the dew point temperature of air, and there are chances that if this temperature is too low, you may have to reheat and then put in the conditioned space. With using the desiccant cooling system, if it is a adiabatic system, you are not removing heat simultaneously, then it will move along this line. That is there will be rapid rise of temperature along with the reduction in humidity ratio. And but then if you are able to provide cooling, which is more possible with the in the liquid desiccant based cooling systems, so in that case you may limit the temperature rise of the air when it passes through the dehumidifier, and this is your outlet state where the humidity ratio is quite low and you're able to cater to the latent load of the space. And if this temperature is too high, then you might go for evaporative cooling and then put it in the space. So this is the process of dehumidification shown with the help of the desiccant systems. And the heat recovery from, because as you have seen in this, that you are exhausting the conditioned air which has low enthalpy, right? With the consumption of power, you have reduced the enthalpy, but then you are just throwing it out, right? Which is not a wise thing to do. So that exhaust air, this one, the lower circuit, you should try to utilize the low enthalpy of that and only put it back into the atmosphere after that. So with the help of that, you reduce the temperature and humidity of the outside air that you are taking. So more and more percentage of outside air you want to take in a centralized air conditioning system, this becomes more and more useful or beneficial, right? So here what you are doing is you have low enthalpy air here. You are further reducing the temperature. You are cooling this stream of outside air with the help of heat recovery wheel, and with the help of this desiccant wheel, you are removing the moisture from here, and that moisture is taken away by the hot air and then exhausted into atmosphere, right? So this heat, where will it come from? Here it's shown as if it is you are burning something, so fossil fuel, but it can come from solar thermal collector also. Of course, with the new scenario of there are possibility of cross contamination. Now this type of system is not recommended for many applications, because the contamination in this room air which is being exhausted can get transferred to the fresh air going here. But certainly at least a heat transfer is possible with the help of indirect heat exchangers or heat pipe kind of system. When you are using this desiccant wheel, or it can be a liquid desiccant system also, you can use solar thermal collectors for this application, which provides you the dehumidification. This explains the principle of working of desiccant based dehumidification systems. And as you can see, it gets this air gets dehumidified, but then you have to sensibly cool it, and sometimes even evaporative cooling is used as shown here. This is dehumidification, but temperature rise is there. Sensible cooling is provided. If you're familiar with psychrometric chart, you can understand it easily. And then this is evaporative cooling for reduction of temperature, right? But then on the other side, you have to take away moisture from the desiccant so that you are able to work in cycle. So this is the regeneration process, right? So it's, yeah, if you are going for liquid desiccant based systems, then I'll explain only this diagram. As you can see, the return or outdoor air is treated here, and this is the spray of liquid desiccant, something like a cooling tower, and but internal cooling is also provided. Such adiabatic towers also can be there, but theoretically internal cooling is a better idea. So the return air or the outdoor air here, it is getting dehumidified because of the spray. It comes in contact with the liquid desiccant, and you are also providing cooling with this. So it's possible that you come out in an isothermal process, Otherwise, if you don't provide cooling, it can be adiabatic. So this is reduction of humidity, and along with that, the temperature remains constant, or it may even be possible if you have a good heat exchanger, you can even reduce while you are dehumidifying. But that's a not so easy task. Okay, so this cooling may be provided with a like ambient tower, cooling tower, and then here your liquid desiccant has absorbed moisture from this air, so it becomes dilute. Right, there is water in that which needs to be removed when if you want to continue or recirculate that. So that is done in this regenerator where you need to supply heat. Right, so you need to supply heat. This heat can come from a solar thermal collector. So desiccant systems can also be used for solar thermal. So solar thermal collectors can be used for desiccant-based dehumidification systems. These are some of the models launched by different companies, but there are certain issues with though you can say potentially it's a very good candidate, but there are many challenges like corrosion issues, carryover, low COP in the actual systems, a lot of electrical power consumption, which is not a prudent thing. The cost may be higher, so competing with vapor compression refrigeration system may be difficult. Just showing you one photograph of one of the experiments that one of the master students had done, and here it's a simple system, right? I don't believe in very complicated systems, because what you are collecting is low grade energy, heat, right? So you should not make your system too complicated and not use many electrical components consuming high power. Only if you make it economical and simpler, then the heat that you collect is worth. So just gravels were used in this, and this was used for liquid desiccant regeneration, that is removing moisture from the liquid desiccant rather than water, saline water. It's liquid desiccant in this system. And the instrumentation used in this, the pyranometer with shading ring, and then data logger and wind velocity measurement, direction measurement, and ambient temperature and humidity measurement. And in this, for water desalination, it could be 7.34 kilogram or liters per day per meter square. Right? If you attach some other things like evacuated tube, etc., you might be able to increase it per meter square area, but then actually it's not per 1 meter square. You are adding some additional collector area. So for a simple collector, I find that this was quite good output of the distilled water. But when you use it for liquid desiccant regeneration, the output reduces drastically because the temperatures become much higher. You can see it has reduced from 3.74 to 1.68, almost half of, even less than half of it. Right? This is because the temperatures will remain higher, because the vapor pressure of water is not so high when you use a salt solution, right? So according to that assessment, 4 meter square area would be required if you want to provide 1 kilowatt of latent cooling. This is talking about only latent cooling or dehumidification for 5 hours. Yeah. So I have come to the end of the presentation, and it shows 1524 in my laptop. And there is one quiz if the hosts feel that it can be done. One quiz is there. It's as per your wish. If we have reached almost the end, then I can do without that also.
Yes, sir. Let me first check whether the question answers from the students from the participants, and
Right.
if the time will permit, then definitely we can arrange that quiz.
Okay.
Yeah. So, is there any question, my dear participants? If you have any question, then you can raise your question. Yeah, sir. Maybe there will be no any question from the participants. So, sir, you can put the link on the chat box for the quiz.
Right. So it has been the other way. I have been asking questions, and participants have not asked the questions. Yeah. So I put the link. There are 30 participants. I hope there will be at least 25 responses.
Sir, can you introduce please the
Yes.
quiz is on which topic?
Yes, this is solar. It's related to this lecture only, solar heating and cooling. So yeah, you are able to respond. No? Response is open. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's related to what I discussed. Yeah. Uh, Probably couple of questions one may not be able to answer because I have skipped one video. So those related with this South Africa, the plant at South Africa, it was actually a vapor absorption refrigeration system, two-stage system, and installed at some place in South Africa, MTN headquarters for data center cooling, and it was like the manufacturer of that chilling plant absorption chiller is Broad, BROAD. That is the manufacturer of that company, and it demonstrated the use of linear Fresnel lens type of collector. I think today in the morning session that collector was explained. So it used that type of collector, and the temperature was up to around 180 degrees Celsius. Pressurized water was used as a working fluid for that plant, and it was uh, giving you the chilled water for cooling of the data center. It was two-stage vapor absorption refrigeration system. Okay, so though I gave answer to some of these questions, so even with that, you might answer and respond. I'll provide you the link to that video also later on. You can watch it if interested. I think it should be there somewhere in the presentation.
Yes, sir. We have seen actually that is on your presentation.
Mhm. And here. No, that's quiz, sorry.
Sir, is it possible to share the same PPT with the participants?
I'll send it to you. I'll take the print of
Yeah,
this.
yeah, sir. Yeah, sir. You can send me on my mail so that I can share the same thing with the participants.
Are you going to take some tests?
So, sir, maybe after that video, the participants can fill the same form. So,
Okay, so let's just have a look at the responses. Oh, yeah, it is 7 are there. 8. Yeah, so which area has highest contribution solar water heating system, large domestic water heating? I think for the world it was 50% or something. And which type of solar collector used at IKEA Singapore? It was flat plate collector as seen in that photograph. And heat recovery unit, which component will not cause cross contamination? If you use indirect heat exchanger or heat pipe, it will not create cross contamination between the outdoor air and the exhaust air. But if you use sensible heat wheel and enthalpy wheel, it will create. Of course, evaporative cooler will also not create cross contamination. Yeah. So when you make a quiz in a hurry, you also make mistakes. Name the manufacturer of water chilling plant. Yes, it was broad. It could be read in the video. Which type of water chilling plant installed? So that was a two-stage absorption and MTN headquarters. The type of collector was linear Fresnel lens type of collector. And solar thermal collectors will be provided to which component of liquid desiccant? Yeah, so it will provide heat to the regenerator. This was explained at towards the end of the lecture. And the maximum COP in a single stage could be 0.8, right? The range was shown 0.6 to 0.8, and for two stage it was shown 0.9 to 1.2. Okay, so I come to the end of my lecture, and I thank the host, the faculties involved in arranging this FDP as well as the participants. And I
yes,
hope it
sir.
has been useful to you in your journey towards understanding the renewable technologies better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, Dr. Jignesh Mehta, sir, for giving such a wonderful expert talk and sparing your valuable time among us. So, thank you, sir, once again for delivering in the very interesting session. And my dear participants, we will meet tomorrow on the same link and as per the schedule. So, thank you again to all participants and the speaker.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.